Sveiki, įsijungę Naujos Lietuva Amerika seriją. Šiandieną man ir Žygiui tiksliau teko padaryti pertrauką nuo mūsų kassavaitinių apžvalgų, nes man egzaminai, o Žygis labai sunkiai ir rimtai dirbo organizuojant renginį, konferenciją Seime skirtą pagerbti ir paminėti Jungtinių Amerikos Valstijų 250-metį. Būtent iš tos konferencijos ir turime du puikius pokalbius šią savaitę. Pirmas pokalbis bus apie Ukrainą su ilgamečiu, ne ilgamečiu, bet ilgalaikiu, sakykime, podcasto draugu Mereško iš Ukrainos Verchovnos Rados, o antra labai svarbi tema, kuri buvo labai rimtai paliesta per konferenciją, yra apie Kubą. Apie Kubos laisvę, apie kovą prieš komunizmą ir diktatūrą Kuboje. Tad linkiu Jums gero klausimo ir kitą savaitę sugrįšime su apžvalga, nes labai daug kas įvyko ir tarptautinėje politikoje, ir Lietuvoje. Tad vėlgi gero klausimo.
Okay, Alexander, it's such a pleasure to host you. This is like you're coming here every second week. You just visited us with NATO Parliamentary Assembly.
Yes.
And now we will speak at the conference where we will fight for freedom in Western Hemisphere and, of course, Ukraine. And I want to congratulate you with accession talks that you just start this week. So how do you feel? Are you, getting closer to the victory?
Yeah, it's definitely a victory for us, politically speaking, diplomatically speaking, and it's definitely a strategic defeat for Putin, because he understands that Ukraine is not alone, that we're part of the European family, we're going to join the European Union, and Putin is afraid of any kind of solidarity, especially coming from the European countries. When he started the full-scale war, he mistakenly hoped that Ukraine would remain alone, but turned out to be that Europe has shown its solidarity, had helped us when it was the most critical hour, the most difficult. And of course, I would like to start by thanking Lithuania, because each time I come here, I get this charge of positive energy, warmth, and your friendship. And it's visible in the streets when you talk to people. To me, Lithuania is the biggest emotional supporter, not only in terms of military aid, not only in terms of material, but also emotionally speaking, in terms of friendship. It's the country which is firmly on our side.
Thank you, because it's really, I was speaking with our Christian Democratic Party on Saturday. It's like a fight of 20 years. We first started to fight for EU membership and NATO membership, Bucharest NATO Summit 2008. Well, 18 years ago, we then failed. We again tried in Vilnius NATO Summit. We rallied all European countries except Germany and America. Now only America is left. But with the EU, I remember the first Lithuanian presidency, Euromaidan started here when Yanukovych said no to association treaty. And finally, you not only have association treaty, you're starting chapters. Now, of course, main worry is how to not only start, but to conclude it successfully. And as we know from our experience with the Baltics, your reforms are very important. Do you think you have enough political will also to discuss it with opposition, like to stay united and to approve most important EU key legislation? Because this is the only way you will be joining with the first. Small countries are trying to maneuver around. Moldova, maybe even Iceland. You will have a lot of competition. Who will make reforms better?
Yeah, I understand that we're only starting the true negotiating process. And the key argument in us joining or acceding to the European Union is, of course, how effective reforms, pro-European reforms are in Ukraine. We definitely have political will, both on the side of the president, also on the side of cabinet of ministers, but also on the side of parliament, because we're united with the opposition when it comes to European reforms. We have the special term for this legislation, which is called European integration legislation, or European legislation, European integration bills. And of course, we definitely support them. We understand that it's a rather long way to go, because we need to continue reforms, especially when it comes to struggle against corruption. It's important. We're doing everything, and we see results, that no one is above the law. It's a good news, of course, for us. So, and we're prepared to do everything we can, because from my perspective, at least, it's a security issue. It's an issue about our survival. That's why we are ready, we're committed to implement all necessary legislative steps.
Okay, so let's conclude that Russians are failing on your military fronts. We see your advances, your great drone victories. They are also failing to stop your reforms from inside. But what I'm sure that they will do now, they will try to create you a lot of political obstacles in all EU capitals. They will find some parties who will go against your accession negotiation, maybe even block it. So what you need to do, like people like you are wonderful. I see you always on CNN, on all other big media outlets, speaking and defending Ukraine. But you need to form teams and, like, on parliamentary diplomacy level, to speak with all parties, to try to explain that this is to their benefit. You are saving Ukraine, but political, parliamentary diplomacy was not so active in the beginning. You are the incarnation of it. Do you think, President office understands the power of politicians speaking to each other now?
Well, first of all, we appreciate experience of Lithuania. It's invaluable for us. And to prevent from making mistakes, we need to use your experience, because you have already done this before, and you are very eager to share this experience. And it's extremely valuable and important for us. As for the presidential office, I hope that they do understand. Especially, for example, parliamentary dimension, which is also important. And interestingly, the chair of the committee dealing with European integration is the representative of opposition. We get along very well with her. I admire her, I have respect, and we are acting in unison, because there is no opposition, no ruling party when it comes to joining the EU. We know that we have to be diplomatic, political, because there are forces within some countries. There are, I would say, those forces which support our bid to accede to the EU, and lots of the majority. But at the same time, there are forces which can be used even by the Kremlin, unfortunately. We have to be careful about that and vigilant. At the same time, we see certain progress, because till now, the biggest stumbling block was the position of Hungary. But it has changed, and now we're trying to find a compromise. It's a good precedent, good sign, which means that we can find a rational compromise, not compromising our national interests, yes, but at the same time, we are ready for reasonable compromises which will speed up the process of our accession.
And really, please prepare those parliamentary teams to speak with the West, because it is also part of negotiations. I was co-secretary of accession talks, I remember well. Its commission is just preparing the talks, but voting on everything, it's one member state. So capitals, role of capital is very important. And maybe you could use, groups like Nordic Baltic. I see Poles and Hungarians, new leaders teaming for the first time. Visegrad 4 will meet. Maybe they could be a vehicle. But your speaker, your parliament was so good during the war, asking for assistance. Now I think you need to turn your energy into speaking on political level with all capitals. And last thing that is, I think, difficult for you, as we see from Lithuanian eyes, using your diaspora. You have many Ukrainians in each country right now, but when I speak with some Ukrainians, some say, oh, they are traitors. They left the country, especially the men. And of course, you might feel like that, but you need them. They are your best friends in lobbying your case in those. Some of them already citizens of those countries. You need to organize it. We are very well organized in Lithuania with diaspora. So maybe, one of the ideas that we can transmit to you, think about using diaspora from America to all other EU and NATO countries, because they are citizens of those countries.
I absolutely agree with you, because we should look at our diaspora abroad as an asset, as people, as a sort of maybe informal ambassadors, which can be very helpful.
Exactly.
Because many people, they remain to be Ukrainian patriots and they want to help their country. Of course, we would like all our people, and according to some estimates, around 8 million Ukrainians are now abroad because of the full-scale invasion. We would like them to come back, but they live in different circumstances. We cannot influence their decision, but in any case, I believe that we should preserve this bond between their motherland, Ukraine, and diaspora, and they can be very helpful in many ways. So we count on them, and we're thinking how to maintain this bond, especially with young Ukrainians living abroad.
Maybe you could even think, like we discussed with our common friend Frédéric Petit, also active with United for Ukraine. Maybe you can even create a system where Ukrainians are electing representatives, like from Europe, from America, from UK, to Verkhovna Rada. French, they have 7 or 9 like that. Italians we just have 1. But still, it creates some kind of structure where they compete and feel united. My last question, because you are taking part in very interesting conference. This is not only about your region. When I saw one of the last votings of United Nations on Cuba, when America was asking for support, please isolate this communist dictatorship, my own country abstained, because Spanish socialists, they were so much in favor of Cuban communists and they didn't want us to go against them. So we had to maneuver, sadly. But your country was so brave, and I know that you initiated this. You stood with American Communist Cuba. Explain me why. Is it because Cubans are sending many soldiers on the Russian side and killing you actually on the front lines? What's the link?
Yeah, it's one of the reasons. I don't know the exact figures, but it seems like several thousand, maybe more than 2,000 Cubans are fighting on the side of Russia and killing Ukrainians. And of course, to us, it's a big problem. And it's a big problem. And it's very telling when we're talking about the nature of the Cuban Castro regime right now. They're on the side of Russia. So, and the friend of your enemy is, by definition, is your enemy. But at the same time, I'm very proud of this decision by our diplomats at the General Assembly, because right now Ukraine holds, so to speak, a high moral ground. We're a fighting country, and our vote is very symbolic. It also means that we're firmly on the side of principles like democracy. We want to see Cuba free and truly democratic country. In our parliament, we have created a special group of MPs called Free Cuba, and we support free democratic Cuba. Also, we are on the side of our strategic partner, the United States, also. So it has different this decision has different reasons. But most importantly, it means that Ukraine is fighting for democratic values. We are on the side of democracies against autocratic regimes. Autocratic regimes, they have their own international. They stick together. And we also, democracies also should stick together. And I hope that the United States will remain the leader of this democratic world.
But I think this is very wise. As a former Lithuanian ambassador in America, I'm just saying, because you show to Americans, okay, for you, situation in Cuba is the most important, like Venezuela. The West Hemisphere is the most important for America. They say it in all the statutes. And you say, we are with you. We support you. We can, we always stand with you. The same you did in Middle East. well, they didn't maybe embrace your support as they should. But I think this is very right, because you never know. Maybe Marco Rubio will run for president, and one day he becomes a president. And if he is becoming a president, I'm quite sure that it will be Marco Rubio inviting you to NATO. And in NATO, you just need one man, one powerful president to decide, okay, I invite Ukraine. The rest, NATO members will follow. So I think it's very wise. The only problem with America today, that official America still stands like a neutral position between Ukraine and Russia. This I cannot understand. I think Americans, like Europeans, they have to stand with Ukraine. Why? Because you defend American ideas. You defend ideas of democracy and freedom. You just explained it. Why should they be among the victim and aggressor? I don't understand. But, well, we will see. In this conference, we will get wiser. And thank you, AK. Thank you, Alexander, for the advice. Okay, thank you. Great. Okay, we are making concluding summary for Lithuanian American podcast listeners about the event we just had. So, my and Emanuel's wish was to collect the best freedom fighters from Europe and to show your freedom cause, to say that, guys, we can do something together. We can support each other. Are you happy with the results? Let's start with you. Maybe also a few, points of presentation, because they could not maybe know you, and then, Cuban resistance leader, Venezuelan resistance leader, and then what's your impression?
Well, first of all, congratulations to Emmanuel and to you. The conference was a success.
Thank you.
It's one of the most productive conferences I've been in. The networking, the way it was organized, I think we got stuff done. And I think we're going to see the effects. So congratulations.
Thank you.
I think it's gonna be very productive. That's what I want to say. My main points was, we're close to freedom in Cuba, but the regime still needs to be overthrown. As long as the Castro Mafia and the Communist Party have any kind of power in Cuba, there will not be democracy. Look what happened in Nicaragua. And we need your help. Help like Lithuania has done. Blocking the funds for the regime, standing with democracy in Cuba until we defeat them. And it's very important that American sanctions, which are very good, Trump has a very good policy in Cuba, are maintained until we break that regime. It is not an authoritarian regime. It is a totalitarian regime. And my other point here was, the regime in Cuba is identical to what you suffered in Central and Eastern Europe. A Soviet totalitarian regime with the massacres, the mass deportations, the concentration camps, and what
part of Soviet Empire.
Part of Soviet Empire. Definitely part of. They even had Castro even put reference to the Soviet Union in the Constitution. It was, and so it's very important to eliminate that apparatus. The security, the Cuban KGB, is the force keeping the regime in power. It's being trained by the Chinese, by the Russians. Some of those troops are in Ukraine fighting against Ukrainians and in Belarus. So it's very important that we understand that the danger of that regime and that we push for the end of that regime. And lastly, that very sadly, the Spanish government, which is a democracy, which came from a dictatorship, has taken a stance in support of that regime, and it should not be morally accepted.
Yeah, so now for Spanish socialists, but I saw many countries around the table, Czechs, Poles, Swedes, reacting positively. They were raising questions. Why, if Emanuelis and others initiated it here in the Lithuanian parliament, why can't we block this EU-Cuban agreement in our own countries?
It was stopped in 2021.
Thanks to you,
21. Yes.
It's very important. Thanks to you, we can, because of you, it is a provisional agreement. They were never able to make it permanent. So now that Calas has begun the review, that can be stopped overnight. In 24 hours, it can be stopped. It's not a permanent treaty, it's a provisional treaty. So I think it's important to keep that in mind.
The State Department mentioned 3 times our historical blocking of
3 times.
And we hope maybe one day Marco Rubio will become American president and he will never forget what we did for him. But now let's talk Venezuela story. For the first time, I think, in the history of this historic chamber, we had a Machado, the leader of Venezuelan freedom fight, speaking with us, and you are the right hand of Machado. Can you explain your story and, what was your message and what do you think was a reaction of those freedom fighters of Europe?
Well, first of all, thank you for having us. It's a huge honor, and I think it was a success, definitely, because I think we identified, common challenges, but also common ways to keep going and keep fighting together. And that is very important because it's about international solidarity, and it's about that all the countries present here, all are related in many ways through the influence of our countries and this idea, both sides of the Atlantic. So I think that was very important. And in your case, and probably one of the most important lessons from now the Venezuelan perspective is that we are in front of a huge opportunity to get a real transition to democracy. So it's important, and this is the moment, as in Cuba or Nicaragua, to make more pressure, to push even more, because this is the kind of things that make react criminal regimes as the Venezuelans is, or the Cuban or the Nicaraguans, just for mention some of them. So in our case, the case was clear. This is about international solidarity, this is about pressure, and this is about the huge opportunity we have to achieve a real transition to democracy in which Venezuelans can get a real democratic government elected. But most important to understand that now we are in presence of a huge, as never before, I have to say, well, at least never in the last decades, a strong policy that it's a credible threat. Thanks to the leadership of the United States, that it's making these regimes to concede. And that's very important. We need to maintain this momentum in order to get real results, because these regimes are very experts, as Russians as well, in order to gain time. So we need to defeat them, and we need to give even more pressure in that sense. And one other thing,
Elections will be when the elections will be.
we are looking for that. We don't have an election date yet.
Is the future?
But yeah, but for sure we need presidential elections in Venezuela.
Yeah.
Because that's what Venezuelans want, but it's what the region needs. And even in the best interest of the U.S. and the Western Hemisphere, but even to the European countries, is what the best possible way to solve this. And one last thing that is important, and that this conference was very important to understand, is the influence of Russia's regime in Latin America. Because, this is not only a problem of Europe. The presence of Russia and other enemies of the Western Hemisphere and Western values in Latin America is a clear example of how the autocrats cooperate together. So we Democrats need to cooperate together as well in order to defeat these regimes. I think we have probably the best opportunity in years to achieve this. So thank you for your solidarity. I think the example that Lithuania gives, not only to us, but the entire world, is huge. You are about, the democratic legacy you are bringing to the entire world is very important. So thank you for this conference. And I think probably will be the first, but not the last.
And Pamela, you're hiding somewhere there. We have wonderful right director for Cuba and Venezuela. I made these conclusions for myself. Like at the end of the conference, that panel that you moderated, I was just thinking, we are always asking, Americans support us. We are dying here. Russians are coming. But it sounds a bit childish, to be honest. It's time to grow up. Because as one of our friends raised the question, if you are always asking Americans to stand with you in Europe, that's okay. But what did you do for freedom in Cuba? And actually, that was Congressman Mario Diaz-Balart.
Yes.
He actually addressed the whole United for Ukraine team and said, okay, and he was really powerful in Congress lobbying for military assistance for Ukraine. He said, I can discuss it again with President Trump, but what did you do to stand with Cuba? And if, in case you support this, socialist Spanish approach, how can I sell it to Trump? And that's a good question. So we Europeans, we have to really stand with you, show example, lead by example in Venezuela, in Cuba, in Western Hemisphere, because it's it's not even like moral duty. Like, it's easy for us because we defeated that red dragon here. Our businessmen, our companies, our engineers, they know how to stop the beast. Like in Cuba, we have a lot of American Definitive enterprise who are ready to go and fix the stuff because we fixed that Soviet communist stuff. We know how to deal with that. So maybe that is the link, Pavel. I think in the beginning of those panels, they like on Europe's East and West Hemisphere, they were kind of separate. But I felt the connection at the end. And finally, thank you, IRI, because you connected us. Another director for Eurasia, Steve Nix, was writing me messages. I'm in Moldova and in Armenia. He's everywhere. But you connected us. IRI, created by Ronald Reagan in 1982, by Westminster speech, you still function and you still exist. Thank you for that.
Thank you for your contribution. Yes, it's very important what you're doing, making bridges and uniting all fronts together. Well, Žygis is talking to unite everything in one. Well, enemy is the same. They're trying to restore their empire, and the Cuba activists working probably in Venezuela, trying, to support the ruins of the regime. They're working actually now against Bolivian. I think so. They're trying to put down the new democratically elected president of Bolivia. Cubans, means Cuban intelligence. So we should be united and strongly. Our solidarity should function like a military front line and in support of Ukraine.
Thank you. Thank you very much for those words. And just to mention some thoughts on this, you just mentioned, the IRI is continue supporting freedom fighters around the world. After all the struggles that happened in the last 2 years, IRI continue fighting for them. And we will continue fighting for freedom fighters around the world, particularly Venezuela, Cuba, Nicaragua. The work that we are supposing to do for the next years is definitely planning and stand right next to these freedom fighters that are here. In the morning, Michael Mickelson said, we are not doing enough. And I think that is a very important reflection that came up after this event, because it will turn in a political will to do more. And actually, that is the main milestone of this kind of event, that we understand what we are doing and maybe understand that it's not enough. So we should do more. And maybe next time, in the next 5 years, that was the last question, we can see Venezuela and Cuba and Nicaragua free, ultimately, because without those countries free, the Western Hemisphere will not be free.
And not to leave IRI alone fighting in those territories. You add a little national budget of Lithuania, of Estonia, of Poland. It's not like the whole budget, just few programs, but you add it together, in one or another country, it might work. Okay, so thank you, Orlando. Thank you so much. Thank you absolutely for everything. And thank you, Emanuelis. We continue your fight, Emanuelis. Are you happy?
No, I'm happy that we can settle an example for Venezuelans and Cubans to make changes, showing that we were successful here in Lithuania, Poland, Middle Europe, North Europe, fighting against Soviet Union and communists. We never, ever become like them. During occupation time, we always kept our distance. Of course, Catholic Church related to the Holy See were on our side. Underground was on our side, so intellectuals were together, but we never become like them. Never become like them, never become Soviets, never become communists. So in this case, I hope you will find in Cuba people who never become like them and will try to liberate Cuba and stop anti-Ukrainian activities in Latin America.
Hugo, your conclusions. Did you like it? Did you see, kind of the network growing? We are not so alone on freedom anymore. Can we show Americans some kind of example that we might lead as a group of friends, group of countries, and make some changes in this world still fighting for freedom?
Well, as I said at the beginning of Pamela's question, one thing that I have the privilege is to feeling here in Lithuania within a family. So with that confidence, I can tell you that every time I'm here, things happen. And these kind of events are powerful because they shake up things. Let me give you just one example. We've been fighting since June 2021 to create the consciousness among other European nations to go after PDCA, to reconsider the ratification.
EU-Cuba agreement.
And then all of a sudden, it's not just about us not feeling alone, it's about Lithuania not being alone. Because you are not just standing at the top of the hill, being the only one defending a principle. All of a sudden, there is no reason for the rest of Europe to continue pretending that what they are doing somehow benefits the Cuban people. Because every dime that has been sent to Havana, and we can prove that chapter and verse, has been used by the regime to increase repression, persecution, imprisonment, torturing, every single thing that the treaty claims to fight against. So I would encourage this type of events to continue, if anything, to increase the volume, because this is the time. After the announcement made by the administration that the Iran issue has been, at least for the next 60 days, settled, it's very clear, at least from the official position, that Cuba is next.
We can concentrate on freedom and push Americans to the right.
And settle our examples, like example to follow.
One more thing that I think it's very, very important, and it's extremely relevant to have Pedro here. One thing that has been, I believe, a misconception is that in these 3 steps that have been very clearly defined by the administration, especially by Secretary Rubio, the misconception that Cubans are not there anymore. It's a dangerous misconception. Because when Mike was talking about it, he was talking about the military advisors. But we know, Pedro can confirm this to you, that you have still thousands of Cuban personnel. The members of the Cuban brigades are there, the members of the support personnel, the coaches, the engineers are still there.
Even medical brigades.
Even medical brigades are still there. Actually, the mission, Barrio Adentro, celebrated a couple of weeks ago their anniversary openly. They were not even hiding. So that is something that it's worth analyzing, because one thing that can be a challenge for the future of democracy in Venezuela is what's going to happen there. Because these people have been embedded not only within the brigades, they have been creating networks, they have been indoctrinating people. And what we're witnessing in Bolivia is that a few dozen of these agents were able to almost topple a government elected by 55% of the voting,
during free and fair elections,
and with 83% of the vote going for democratic parties.
Okay, Hugo. Let me turn to the final speaker and actually organizer, not only of this conference, Anna Smith, legendary staffer of Foreign Affairs Committee. You were very young, 22 years, you said, when you landed first in Lithuania, a few months after when Emanuelis voted for independence.
and sent an invitation to you.
Yeah, and then organized first historic trips of congressional delegations, Durbin to us, and then later helped us with NATO, convincing congressmen that they need to invite Lithuania to NATO. Is it Lithuanian? Because you have Lithuanian descent, as I know. What kind of virus it is? Why did you do it then? And what's happening with us? Why we still fight for freedom? We learned it from you. You brought it back from America.
Yeah, you're passing it forward. You're passing forward what we learned when we, as Americans, wrote the Constitution and what we stood for. And in the 1980s and the 1990s, I mean, it was very that sense of peace through strength, the sense of, tear down this wall, and that things were changing, that the Soviet Union was not going to continue to exist. And so in 1990, Lithuania then took that leap. I mean, and I was here in the parliament with, these pictures weren't here. Things were different. It looks the same, but it looks different. And you were waiting to see when the recognition of your reestablished independence was going to come. You did it. You've just been re-elected. The Sąjūdis had just turned into the Lithuanian.
And then we ask you to make a resolution of recognition, and you did it after some try, with Jesse Helms and others.
Yeah, Senator Helms after March 11th, it was 10 days after the redeclared Independence Act, the Senate considered a resolution for the U.S. government saying that it shall recognize the reestablished independence, because we never recognized legally de jure what happened to Lithuania, but de facto we didn't have an embassy here. We didn't have full relations. And now it was time to do that. So if what we had always done, now we had the opportunity to follow through on that. So we had to explain that to members of Congress. What does the doctrine of non-recognition mean? And there were, Bill Huff was very involved in wrote his definitive book that we were looking at in Congress to try and give guidance to counter the arguments that it's too unbalanced right now, or it's destabilizing to recognize Lithuania's independence, because because it's delicate in what's going on with Gorbachev and Glasnost and Perestroika, and we shouldn't do anything right now. So that
I'm sorry for overbooking you with our cables, fax machine.
No, and you were giving me, but I just wanted to finish real quick. So that resolution didn't pass the first night, and I was so sad. I was crushed, and I was in contact with Emmanuelis at the time, and the senator I worked for said, "Don't give up. We are not giving up. Don't be sad." He said, "I will reintroduce this resolution." He said, "You get every Lithuanian American that you know and you get them on the phone tonight, and you get them to call their members of Congress tomorrow." And Lithuanian Americans at that time, one called one Lithuanian American, and the other one called another Lithuanian American, and the phone call chain started, and it really made an impact on the Hill. Senator Paul Simon had so many calls from Lithuanians in Illinois that he said, if I do that again, please let me know, because I didn't realize how incredibly important that vote was to our Lithuanian community.
Okay, let's then conclude. It takes one brave young lady, another brave young parliamentarian, and you can change the world. You can, you have just to find just brave people.
Do that in Cuba.
That can, like Reagan, like John Saul II, and they go against the majority. Majority loves status quo, everyone.
Yeah.
But we can still change it. Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you, absolutely.
Tikiuosi, kad ši serija jums patiko. Man tikrai labai patiko šitie pokalbiai, nors, aišku, dėja šiuose negalėjau dalyvauti. Tad, jeigu patiko, būčiau dėkingas, jeigu paliktumėt komentarą, prisijungėt į mūsų pokalbį ir galbūt net įtrauksime jūsų komentarus į sekančią mūsų diskusiją. Jeigu to dar nesate padarę, prašau, prenumeruokite, spauskite like, kaip sakant, ir iki kito karto.